Hello and welcome to another edition of In the State House with Senator Jason Lewis and Representative Michael Day. And my name's Alan Macdonald, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another discussion of the activity in the State House on behalf of the citizens of Winchester and Winchester environs. Senator Lewis and Representative Day, great to be with you again.
Great to be back, thanks.
Great to be with you, Alan, and with Rep. Day.
It's been a very busy year, and I think this will be a great chance for all of us to catch up on the activities that I know you've been involved in, both state and local. We have had the first year of Governor Charlie Baker's administration, and I'll be interested to hear, as we all would, how the relationships are going with the administration and the Democratic legislature. It seems like you're getting a lot done. Let me start with you, Senator Lewis.
Indeed, I think it's been a very productive relationship. I think the governor, to his credit, has really reached out to the legislature and wanted to work closely on a range of issues, starting with the state budget and the strong fiscal management in the state, but also other issues like fixing the MBTA and also addressing the opioid and substance abuse epidemic in the state. So I think we're off to a strong start. The governor also, I think, has put in place very strong cabinet secretaries across the different agencies, and we in the legislature work closely with those folks as well. And I've had very good experience working with them. So I'm very pleased with the progress we've made and optimistic about next year.
And Representative Mike Day, you've had your first year under your belt in the House for Stoneham and Winchester.
Yep.
How has it been going?
It's been great. I didn't have a point of reference for the previous administration, but I've enjoyed working with, as Senator Lewis said, the administration folks themselves have been great, really accessible, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my role in there. Okay. I've had a great year. Learning curve's been straight up, but I've enjoyed it tremendously so far.
Great. Well, there have been a lot of big issues. I mean, certainly we could break them down in transportation, education, public safety, so many public health, a number of things that you've been involved in. I know, Senator Lewis, you're chairing the Committee on Public Health Financing, and there's an awful lot that's happening there. You mentioned the opioid situation. Yes. There's a tremendous amount of attention on that, is there not?
It is such a crisis, and I think everyone who's watching us probably knows somebody who's been affected by opioid addiction or substance abuse. It's nobody is immune to this. And I think the good news is that we have all of our leaders and our community groups and our healthcare providers and our law enforcement that I think are now really working well together. And starts with the leadership of the governor, the legislature, Attorney General Healy, and then kind of all the way down. And I think that's we're really starting to make some real progress there. So. More work to do, but I think we've got legislation that's coming through. We've got steps that our medical community is taking now, our hospitals, very innovative practices from some of our police departments, like in Gloucester, for example, and elsewhere. So I think we're now moving in the right direction.
As an observer of the scene and all the good things that you folks are doing, it amazes me how negatively critical so much comment on the national health care law that was passed, the Accountable Care Act, and how much positive, frankly, for the Massachusetts individual mandate, we call it, but they are different, but then again, the principle is so similar. But in the state of Massachusetts, Commonwealth of Mass, it seems to work that we're able to find ways to finance health care for those who can't pay for as much as they'd like to themselves. And nationally, we have a tremendous problem with that. I look to you both to be examples for what we could do to convince other states that there is a way to do it.
Yeah, it's certainly been, I think that one of the biggest challenges we have in government is figuring out the healthcare piece. It's the costs keep climbing, not only for individuals, but for our municipalities as well. And Massachusetts has been a leader in that respect. We did get the Obamacare was here. It started here. We did a great job of getting people, as I say, into the boat, but now we've got to figure out how to roll that thing and get this moving in the right direction. And I think Massachusetts, you know, from the legislature's you know, origins, pushing that legislation through can serve as a model for the rest of the state, rest of the country. Touching back on the opioid issue, you know, one of the challenges we've got is not just addressing the root problem, but follow-up care. And that's a big piece of parity that we've got to deal with. Mental health as well as substance abuse issues, and making sure that that coverage exists, making sure that the resources are available for that, you know, step-down treatment and rehabilitation. And I think that's a big challenge we've got coming up.
And the other thing we don't always think of, we tend to focus in on the individuals who are suffering from the illness of addiction and the kind of care that they need. And Rep. Day's rightly making the point, it's not just detox services, it's a whole range of care that needs to be available. But it's also, we don't always think about the ancillary impact. For example, I recently, actually through Hallmark Health, through the programming that Hallmark Health is involved in, had a chance to meet with grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. And in almost all those cases, the reason that the parents can't raise the children is because of drug addiction, and they're not able to take care of their children. So we're thrusting people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who thought they were done raising children, now having to go back and raise children, and that brings a whole series of challenges. And so, you know, the impact on the children, on the grandparents, and on society at large is there's so many difficult and harmful impacts.
True, huh? Representative Day, talking about committee work. You got a bunch of committee assignments. We talked a little bit about it the last time. Has that worked out well for you in relation to you having responsibilities in the district?
Yeah, it's been great. I sit on 4 fairly substantive committees. Judiciary, education, mental health and substance abuse, and post-audit and oversight. And it's, you know, as the saying goes, you're either at the table or on the menu, and these committees have allowed me to be at the table and really advocate for Winchester. It's been fantastic, it really has. And they're busy committees, and they're doing important work in there. So I'm thrilled to sit on them. We sit on the education committee together, and it's just, that's where things are moving, and it's been a great
Education's had a lot of attention on the testing this particular year, and I know it seemed to me that Commissioner of Education came out with a kind of an in-betweener on keeping the MCAS exam in some respects and opening up to a national kind of a test. Is that, have I got it right, or how is that going?
MCAS 2.0 is what they call it.
MCAS 2.0, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. We have to wait to see the details. I think you know, we seem to be moving in the right direction in terms of some of the deficiencies. I mean, MCAS stood us in good stead for a long time, but it's time for, I think, something new, and so I think this is the right time. But you know, I'd love to see a broader discussion about really almost education 2.0 rather than MCAS, because the Education Reform Act, which led to, you know, MCAS and it led to significant investment in our schools. It also led to charter schools. You know, that dates back to 1993.
Yes, it does.
20-some years have gone by. Really, what we should be looking at, what do we need to do, you know, in order to have our schools be, you know, continue to be successful and really lead the country in the next several decades. And that's where I think we have to look at testing and assessments as part of that, but also how do we make sure that the Chapter 70 formula is really, you know, brought up to date, and some of the other
Well, you've been a real
needs that we
champion
have,
on the
so.
Chapter 70 formula right from the start. And yes, it has to be, you would think, changed from time to time.
Yeah.
And certainly I do myself remember the 1993 time period when Jack Rennie and the different education committees were business and, you know, private and public were working on this. And it seems to me that people can take a little bit of a bow anyway, that we do have test scores that show that the students are performing well, but that's only part of it, I know. And
right, and unfortunately, we do still have big gaps between students in some of our more affluent and less affluent communities, some of our minority students. So I think this is a good time to take stock of the things that we're doing well, and what, for example, we've learned now that extended learning time is it makes a big difference.
Sure.
Not really in Winchester schools, that's not really necessary for the most part, but in some of our districts where we have a lot of students who come from less affluent backgrounds, they're struggling academically, that can make a big difference. So there's strategies that we've learned about that now we have to figure out, how do we move all of our schools forward in the years
Yeah,
ahead.
those kind of three big pieces from the 1993 Act we're really taking a hard look at now. The Foundation Budget Review Commission has finished its role, made the recommendations to the legislature. We're going to be tackling that hopefully soon. Charter schools as well as the MCAS. Those three really big pieces came out of that 93 Act. And we're looking at all three of those now in the committee and hopefully coming out with some legislation on that end.
To me, the good news as an observer is that the momentum, whatever the details are, the fact that you're spending so much time worrying about where we go in public education puts us still ahead of a lot of states, because a lot of states don't have that momentum. They've never been able to get enough commonality at the table with all the different interests. It doesn't seem to me as you've been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, by just about any metric, Massachusetts is top in the country. If you look at test scores, if you look at how we finance our schools, but obviously much more progress that we need to make here.
Right,
We don't want to rest on.
and we can't be complacent. Right.
Yeah, how about that? Transportation. We got a lot of stuff. There's every single day. We're still reading about last winter.
Yes.
and
Getting ready for the snow again.
transportation and things. I know it. So we're almost into the next winter. But you've both been involved in helping out locally, commuter rail activity, and where we're going with state investments in public transportation. But Representative Day, you've been involved in that quite a bit.
Yeah, we've had some productive talks with the MBTA about the commuter rail station, which is well beyond need for revamping. The committee here in town has done a great work getting this to the stage where we're at now, which is just about the 15% design stage. So we're on track for getting this done, getting the station redesigned, rebuilt, because you've got concrete falling. It's not a great situation for our town right now. Yeah. But we've got it on track. We're moving towards, we're trying to get into the capital plan to make sure that the financing's in place so that we can get this station redone. But I'll turn to Senator Lewis as far as the commuter rail schedules itself. Keolis and the MBTA announced kind of by fiat that they were changing some of the schedules, which is going to greatly impact Winchester residents. I don't know if you want to
Senator Lewis, you've been vocal about that.
We were very concerned to hear that. I mean, but going back to last winter, we had all the problems with the commuter rail, and we teamed up with some of our colleagues from the region to really push Keolis, who operates the commuter rail, to really get the service back online and recover faster. And then just recently, it was completed new commuter rail schedules were rolled out, and it was apparent that there really was no public input that was sought. The legislators hadn't been consulted, and we heard immediately from our constituents here in Winchester, who ride the commuter rail every day, depend on it to get to work. Sure. And there was going to be service cuts, essentially trains, particularly in the morning, rush hour, that were no longer going to be serving Winchester. So that was a real shock to a lot of us. And so we tried to quickly get rally support from other communities that were affected, and fortunately, with all of our Winchester residents and several other communities who use social media, and their voices were heard. So within a week, the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Pollock, did come out and grant our request, which was to suspend the implementation and to really restart the process and make sure that this time around they really have an opportunity for the public to weigh in on any changes in the schedules.
Yeah, they heard fairly loud and clear from the delegation as well as from the regional delegation, which is great. Yeah. Bipartisan group of us really got together quickly on that end, and they backtracked fairly well.
Yeah, I think what they just didn't, they were looking at it more from an engineering efficiency, reliability standpoint, which is important, but they were neglecting to say, well, if you remove a train at 8:35 and people are dropping their kids at at elementary school in Winchester at 8:29, and then that's the train they
practical
make,
impact of it.
and there isn't going to be another train for an hour, they can't get to work on time. What do? They have to drive. We certainly don't want to put more cars on the road.
Right.
So,
With all that discussion on the commuter rail schedule and the financing for commuter rail, is it stalled at all on some of the projects? I'm thinking of the Green Line project that will come out near to where we are if it gets all done, but I read about some of the difficulties that they're having in that. And I don't know if the attention, I think there's more attention, thank goodness, on public transportation generally that you're generating. But how are we doing on those kinds of projects? Are they in the back burner now, do you think? Or
I don't know that they're on the back burner, but they're certainly getting much more scrutiny than they probably did before.
Yes,
they're really digging in and trying to figure out the finances of the T, number one, which is the new control board that was put in place. The governor asked for, we agreed and modified his request, but that's in place now. So they're really trying to get a hold of the T finances.
Okay.
And you've seen former governors Weld and Dukakis saying you need to get more expertise on that financial board to really understand what's going on there. So those projects aren't necessarily on hold, but they're being evaluated much more carefully right now, I think.
And I think it's good that we're putting new management in place, and we are going to pursue some reforms, some of which will be more or less popular. But I think the fundamental issue we still have, and we still haven't solved, is that the T doesn't have the resources that it needs. It's still operating under huge debt,
Crushing debt,
and just to operate the service without having fares that are through the roof, and that defeats the purpose, because then people can't use the trains and the subways and buses. There has to be a sufficient public subsidy, and that's not just for the T, that's true of any public transit system around the country. So we haven't really fundamentally tackled that issue yet, and I think until we do that, we're not going to have the T on completely solid footing.
Okay, well, so many things to tackle and talk about, and of course, we only have a few minutes ourselves here to cover them, but I did want to make sure that we mentioned public safety while we're in the discussion, because such a tragic situation nationally and internationally on public safety. And I'm just curious how much discussion there is in the legislature on what's happening. I know it's more an administrative Department of Public Safety and Secretary of Public Safety issue, but I'm wondering how much discussion there might be in the legislature about some of the issues that are in front of us about how to protect the public against things that seem very difficult to protect us against.
I think it's always front and center. I mean, government's responsibility, public safety is right there at the top of the list. So I think it is, a question of, adequate funding, supporting our, both our local law enforcement, our state law enforcement, as well as state police. We do have some very strong gun control laws in Massachusetts. Most of the things that people talk about wanting to do in Washington, like closing loopholes around background checks and very large magazines, those already are. We've addressed those in Massachusetts. So a lot of that we've done, but it certainly is something we have to be vigilant about, constantly looking at whether we're doing everything we can to keep our communities safe.
Yeah, and here again, I think you see, as Senator Lewis said, Massachusetts is in the lead on gun safety. And there's new legislation coming through. You heard President Obama addressing the loophole of folks that are on the watch list, on the terror list, being able to purchase firearms. And there's a proposal that I've co-sponsored in the legislature now to close that loophole in Massachusetts, to make sure that that type of stuff isn't going on here, and doing what we can in that respect to make sure that we're furthering public safety.
With all the respect we have for those who are our protectors and first responders, Representative Day, I think I saw that you have sponsored a bill to help those who are in the National Guard, providing us public safety in big ways to be eligible for veteran status for service they give. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually a no-cost bill. It's a bill that will allow folks that have served our country in the National Guard or the Reserves for 20 years or more and were honorably discharged to be recognized as veterans. Right now, the Massachusetts statutes don't recognize individuals as veterans. They're not designated as veterans. So this legislation would say if you've served for 20 years, you were discharged honorably, then you get to be recognized as a veteran. Stand up and participate in ceremonies and have burial rights, things like that. Again, it's no cost. They're not going to be getting benefits that veterans otherwise would get, but at least allows them to be recognized as such.
Well, I think from what I've seen of the service that we've had from those folks, it's a well-deserved recognition, truthfully, so hopefully that...
Yeah, we had a great hearing on it. Major General Parnick, Dan Parnick's dad, was supposed to come in, was unfortunately tied up. But we had a resident, Vinnie Basil from Stoneham, come in as well, and had some great meetings with the National Guard and the Reserve on this as well. It went through in Washington. It's in committee right now, similar measure, and so hopefully we can move this through in Massachusetts as well.
Have you enjoyed your first year?
I have, yeah, it's been great. And one of the things that really I've found interesting is how much you can get done outside of the legislature itself, outside of legislation, meeting with different agencies. We had Secretary Ash come through Winchester, set up a meeting with him to come through and see what we've done here in town with the infrastructure changes, with the commuter rail station that's coming down, and some of the opportunities we have with that Waterfield lot, redevelopment there, getting our downtown kind of revitalized and redeveloped. So the Secretary came through, we had a great meeting with him. Winchester signed up for the Community Compact with the administration, which provides some technical resources and assistance free of charge for the town to help further some of the planning that we're doing here in town. And so that type of thing has really been eye-opening for me and enjoyable. It's you can actually get some great things moving and done.
He's being too modest, but I have to compliment Rep. Day, because as a freshman legislator, here he was, and Secretary Ash is the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development for Governor Baker. I mean, he's overseeing that for the whole state. Right. And here he was in Winchester, walking the downtown, seeing firsthand the commuter rail project at the station and the zoning changes that have been made and the new parking plan, and where we hope to do some mixed-use development to take advantage of the commuter rail, and he was very impressed with what's happening in the town, and the leadership and the collaboration that's going on, the Chamber of Commerce, and I think we are in line to potentially get some state grants to help.
We'll be pushing for state grants
help with
next
those
year.
Projects like the Waterfield lot.
That'd be fabulous.
Enjoyed breakfast at Franny's too that morning.
He did, yes, he was contributing to the local economy.
And Senator Lewis, you of course have experience in both the House and the Senate, and I know from time to time we hear about competitive interest among senators and representatives on issues that the leadership of both bodies seem to be battling from time to time. But how do you find the ability to coordinate your efforts with the House and with your colleagues in the Senate?
Well, I think between the leadership and the House and Senate, it's a healthy competition. And we have a bicameral legislature by design in our Constitution, and the Massachusetts Constitution even older than the federal Constitution. But it's a system of checks and balances, as is the governor, of course, and I think that's good. In terms of the local level, like myself working with Representative Day here in Winchester, and I mean that's a very, very tight partnership, and that's very important that we're completely in sync on what the priorities are for the town, and that we're touching base with the school committee and the selectmen, the planning board, the town manager regularly, and we're all kind of pulling together. And that's exactly what we're doing with the rebuilding the commuter rail station and the downtown revitalization and projects like that.
And budget priorities as well.
Flood mitigation, and
Flood mitigation, that's something you seem to have done well together, and that's we benefit in long-term projects.
The town's made tremendous progress there, and we're getting actually down fairly low on the list now of projects that have to be completed to finish the whole flood mitigation program.
Well, that's good. Now, we've only got a couple of minutes, so we're going to wrap it up, but I can hear how busy the year has been. I'm sure there are some things on the horizon that you both will be spending time on in 2016. Should we expect early issues in 2016, or kind of a long haul? It's an election year, I know, but it's still only year 2 in a gubernatorial term, so it won't be quite as much activity on that side.
We'll have the budget again. It seems like we just finished it, but that'll be looping right back around again in January. I'd expect the solar bill to be taken up very quickly. When we get back in, we weren't able to get it done. It's in conference committee right now. The opioid bill, I think we'll have some substantive legislation coming out on that. The governor put a proposal forward. We heard it in the Substance Abuse Committee, and we'll be working, I know the Senate put a piece out as well, and we'll be working on an omnibus bill, I would think very quickly on that.
Yeah, those
Can't
are all
waste time on
important priorities early next year. And then another one I'll add to that list is updating the state's public records law.
Yes.
Has not been updated since the 1970s, and this governs the ability of citizens and the media to make requests for public information, which they're entitled to. And we've got efforts underway now to kind of bring that law into the 21st